two first years going to France in the 3-star Michelin restaurants. The third year, I said, well, maybe I'll go to Italy and just try that out. When I actually went there, it totally blew my mind.
A moment ago, you said a magic word in wine, which is regions. Let's talk about, I know you love Italian wine. You're an expert in Italian wine. I enjoy Italian wine as well. Are there some Italian wine regions that they deserve more attention? Anything that you're in love with that you want to share with us that may not get the attention it deserves?
Absolutely. And I love wine. I love wine from all over the place. I spent time in France and delving into the wine regions there, and they're amazing and superb. But and I should say, when I was working at Chanterelle, after the two first years going to France in the 3-star Michelin restaurants, the third year I said, well, maybe I'll go to Italy and just try that out. When I actually went there, it totally blew my mind. We rented a little house outside of Siena and explored the area and the territory. And we went to a fantastic restaurant. It was called, and it's still in existence, La Chiusa, in a tiny little village called Monte Folonico. And that really blew my mind completely, because it was in an old olive oil mill just outside of this tiny little village up in the hills. And the food was both very, very traditional and also very kind of cutting edge. They were trying to expand a little bit, but there was a really great balance of that. And I actually went back there to do a summer stage, working in the kitchen in this little restaurant. And what really blew my mind was the fact that everything was local. It was very close to Montepulciano, and I would go walk in the vineyards, and the food, a lot of the food they got, the wines were made from grapes in the vineyards outside the restaurant, and the cheese was the pecorino cheeses in Tuscany were kind of made, locally, and everything was from that particular area. And this was long before farm to table. So that was one of the things that really blew my mind. And in the restaurant, there were women from the village who were doing most of the cooking, and then there was the owner, the wife of the couple that owned the restaurant, who was also back there, kind of decorating plates and things like that. So it was a tremendous experience. And that was just the beginning, because Italy has 20 different regions. Each one of them are very, very different. Now, we think of Italy as being old, the ancient Romans and the Etruscans and all that, and that's true. But Italy as a country is just a little bit more than 100 years old. I mean, 150 years old. It was formed. The reorientation was in 1861. Of the bringing together the Italy that was fragmented after the fall of the Roman Empire in 476 BC AD or something like that. So up until that point, you had all these different city-states that had their own language, their own identity, their own cuisine, their own architecture. And while it's been sort of now collected into one country, it still is, each region is very, very independent and different from one another. It's changing a little bit now. That at one point the dialects were very strong. When I moved to Piemonte, in the village where I lived for over 12 years, when I moved there in 2003, most of the people who were over 50 years old spoke Piemontese as their language, their first language. They had gone to school, so they learned Italian, but they spoke Piemontese whenever they could. And so we have this in Italy. There's an incredible diversity of different places within the country, and it goes into the wine. The wines are very, very different. The grape variety, there are more grape varieties in Italy than most any other place. I say most any other place, maybe Georgia, the former Soviet Georgia. It's not anymore, it's independent, but they might have more, but they're not all sort of in commercial. They're not all being used, and they probably don't even know how many there are. But so Italy has more grape varieties, more diverse wine traditions than most any other place I could think of. So it makes it particularly fascinating. And they're very closely tied to their region where they grow. The grape varieties and the wine that's made from them, and the food that goes along with it, and the people themselves. I learned that very closely when I was living in Piemonte and getting to know the people there. And that was what my first book was all about. It almost wrote itself because I ended up kind of like when I came to New York. I went to visit for first it was a short trip, then I met someone there, and I went back again and went back a few more times, and went there for a year that became more than a decade. And I became very much appreciative of how it all fits together in these areas: the wine, the food, and really the identity of the people themselves.
You've explained your background. Now, how can we help you? Tell us, whether it's you personally, you through the studio, or both. What websites can we be looking for you at? What social media? How can we find you? What are our next steps? How do we find you and follow you?
Well, one of the most important things is check out the website for the New York Wine Studio, which is and it's very simple. It's not a big site, but it talks about the programs, the IWS program with the schedule there mapped out, and the 4 individual classes. So take a look at that, and it is newyorkwinestudio.com, of course. And there's also an email there, info@newyorkwinestudio.com. My own personal website is alantardi.com. So there's some stuff there. And I'm on pretty much, the main social media platforms, although I have to admit I don't always add a whole lot of stuff to them, because I'd rather do it kind of in a more direct, let's put it that way,